We're back here live at the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show in the shadow of Jordan-Hare Stadium. My name is Brandon Adams. That's Jeff Sintel. 40-17 was the final as Georgia loses to Auburn tonight. Sorry about the technical issues a moment ago. We have that cleared up. Unfortunately, we can't do anything about the result of the game. That one can't be cleared up for a while, but I will tell you we're brought to you by Dixie Vodka, the South's best-tasting vodka. The vodka made in the South by people from the South for people like you and me right here in the South. And tonight be a nice night to sort of curl up with a little Dixie Vodka and maybe have a little cocktail here to think about better days. Back when Georgia led this game 7-0 and back when Georgia was 9-0. Unfortunately, that's not the case tonight. Jeff, we talked about this a moment ago. A new audience joining us here for this show now. And, you know, I think the two things can be true at the same time. I think you can have parallel truths. On the one hand, this is just terrible. This is just the worst outcome, the kind of thing I didn't see coming. You know, Auburn people are already trolling me on Twitter. Every, idiot in this industry is trying to have a hot take on Twitter right now. I may just unplug my phone and turn it off for 24 hours. It's a miserable night.
24-hour rule?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's a miserable, miserable night. But at the same time, we haven't had an undefeated national champion since 2013, is that right? That was the Florida State Seminoles. Alabama and all the national championships it's won under Nick Saban. Only one of those teams finishes with a perfect record. I know it's not going to feel like much in the way of consolation right now, but it is fair to say that later on next week we'll all come to the realization that all the goals that Georgia had coming into this game, it exits with all those goals. Just not that winning streak against Auburn, which had become such a point of pride for so many UGA fans.
Yeah, and hopefully this is not evil Jeff coming out here, Brandon. But I'll first of all apologize for those technical difficulties. It looks like those technical difficulties whipped us up front.
Yeah. That's a bad subject.
We couldn't get any sort of push up front.
That's a bad subject.
But I'm going to say this, Georgia fan, and if for those of you guys that were thinking all week that this is a special team, that this is magic happening in Kirby Smart's second year, I want you to go back to where you were in August, and you were thinking Notre Dame maybe, Tennessee maybe, South Carolina maybe, Florida maybe, Auburn maybe. Don't be that fan that goes carnivore on your team right now.
Yeah.
Don't be that fan that sits there and says, Atlanta sports, Georgia letting us down. No. Because if you were on that train and this one thing that happens all the time in major football kicks you off that train, or you want to make sure you ride with the winner, there's the door. I'm going to say this very clearly. Don't be that fan that looks poorly on your football team after all they've poured out for you. Everything you wanted at Tennessee, everything you wanted in Florida, everything you wanted at Notre Dame, everything you wanted in Vanderbilt. Don't be that fan.
But I will agree with you, Jeff. You're absolutely right. You and I were even talking about some of that before the show because you're already seeing some of that kind of stuff online, which is just awful. But I am also going to say, in defense of Dog Nation, the fan base here, it is also okay to be disappointed. It's okay to even be mad.
Be ticked off.
Mad that this team was completely uncharacteristically sloppy and disorganized and undisciplined in the first half. That a miscue like a muffed punt, which Georgia has not really dealt with this season in the third quarter. It's okay to be mad about them. It's okay to drive home from Auburn in a bad mood or turn off your TV in a bad mood. It's okay to be that way. I don't fault Georgia fans for being mad, but I do agree with you from the standpoint of I am going to stop just short of pointing a finger of blame and saying, well, this has got to change, that's got to change. You got to take this guy out of the game and put that guy in. This team had been 9-0 coming into tonight on the blueprint that it used in this game tonight. Tonight it didn't work, but, it would be foolish to say, and because of this game, all of a sudden now you've got to start thinking about personnel changes or blaming this coach or blaming that. It's one thing to be really upset and angry without pointing the finger at blame about what happened.
Yeah, you're supposed to, if you're an intelligent person, to look at the causes. You're supposed to look at why this happened. I think that if you want to get mad and you want to feel bad and you don't have anything in your life to turn to, like your children, your good friends, a nice big steak tonight, a bottle of Dixie vodka perhaps.
Yeah.
If you don't have those things in your life and you just want to obsess and go on message boards and show how smart you are and how hot your takes can be ticked off, be dadgum ticked off about Georgia losing here in Jordan-Hare Stadium and not making it a 40-38 game or a 40-31 game or a 40-30 game. Be mad about something like that. Don't be mad about, this just shows Georgia what everyone said they were or thought they were. Look yourself in the mirror, and you're going to say, yeah, 9-1 after November, I'll take that.
So some of y'all been waiting to get your comments in for a long time. I know I talked a lot in the last portion of our broadcast. We also had some technical difficulties. So now that the stream is working good, let me just let y'all get as many comments in as we can. Chris Topol says, exposed our weaknesses. Offensive line is not that good. Disappointed in the front seven of the defense. You know, to a certain extent, I do have to agree with Chris on this, that for a Georgia offensive line that, to be honest, since the Notre Dame game, and I didn't think the offensive line had a great effort against Notre Dame, but since that Notre Dame game, this is an offensive line that kind of moved out of being one of the real question marks for Georgia and moved towards being a strength, you know, especially the interior of the offensive line that you would have asked a lot of questions about at the beginning of the season. That group has actually played really well up until tonight. But it is pretty clear in Auburn tonight against the Auburn Tigers that this offensive line was sort of back where we thought it was at the beginning of the season. The kind of group you're not quite sure if you could trust. I think Andrew Thomas got a really bright future at Georgia. I think Solomon Kinley and Lamont Gilliard and Kendall Baker need to be commended for what they've been able to do in the interior of the offensive line. Obviously, Isaiah Wynn's had a great career at Georgia. But this is a group that has played well above average to the point of even really being good in a lot of Georgia's games. But this was a little bit of a regression back to the mean for the Georgia offensive line. I agree with Chris Topol on that.
Well, here's what goes through my mind about that, Brandon, is you're going to ridicule and punk a unit that's played above its heds all year long.
Well, no, that's not ridicule. Come on, Jeff. That's not ridicule. I mean, it's fair to say they did not play well. It's fair to bring that up.
Yeah, but I'm saying – they have been playing above their level of play, the way they should play all season long.
Yeah.
So my point there when I said punk or ridicule, because they did not play a little bit above themselves again for the 10th consecutive week, because they did not do that, then people are going to point out and say, well, this offensive line is not as strong as everyone thought they was. The offensive line, if you look at it, those are not yet a strong unit of future pro players or anything like that. I can show you the recruiting rankings. You got a guy that was going to be a guard in the NFL at left tackle. You got a guy that took forever at left guard to try and get on the field at Georgia, finally did.
True.
You got a converted defensive tackle.
True.
You got a 3-star that basically played one play last year and has battled ankle injuries all season long.
A little bit of a project.
And you got a true freshman right tackle who's probably going to make $1 gazillion in the NFL one day, but he got beat today on an early play in the first quarter, by a guy that will be an NFL millionaire as well, and he is a veteran player in the SEC and not a true freshman.
That's all true, but what Chris in the comment section is saying is you probably have to now, when you think about either an Auburn rematch or an Alabama in December, you probably have to move offensive line to that group with Georgia's secondary and Georgia's wide receivers as groups that you're not quite sure is SEC championship caliber. I mean, that's just what you got to do.
Simple people. This is a part where I can just lean expertise in here right now. Georgia wanted to sign 6 offensive linemen last year. They took a JUCO guy. One of them guys did not get the chance to play at Georgia because of off-the-field issues. Georgia has another guy that's redshirting. Georgia wants to sign another 5 offensive linemen this year. Bingo, they don't have what they need on the depth chart yet.
Absolutely.
You know how many defensive backs Georgia signed last year? 7. They do not have everybody in place yet. And the number one thing I want people to think about now, when you look about recruiting and how this team's going to get a lot better, is Georgia, the number 3 class in the nation last year. I won't say smoke and mirrors. I won't say illusion because they're playing fundamental, hard-nosed football, disciplined football. But you got to look at – I want you to tell me any recipe for this year, Brandon, where Georgia would be 9-1 and number 1 or 9-0 and ranked number 1 in the country when you're getting – nothing yet from J.J. Holloman. Nothing yet on the starting front from Richard LeCount. Nothing yet from D'Angelo Gibbs. Nothing yet from William Poole. You're playing basically DeAndre Swift, Andrew Thomas, Jake Fromm, a little bit of Walter Grant. That's what you're getting right now amongst that class. What they're doing right now is coaching up a lot of the talent that went 8-5 last year. Please do not forget that.
Anthony Lee in the comment section also saying the defense got exposed tonight too. And I will admit that I did not expect Kerryon Johnson, who obviously was having a very good statistical season coming in, but I did not expect Kerryon Johnson to have as much success really up the middle against Georgia's defense as he did. He was finding more tough yards in that spot than I expected him to. I don't know that the Georgia defense got exposed necessarily, but they clearly had a bad game. This was not a good game for Georgia's defense.
I struggle with that, Brandon, because in this instant hot take world, and this is what we're paid to do here right now, Brandon. why can't the guy that has a great game just win the point? We've got to call it a bad game. I think Auburn played fantastic up front. They pushed guys around all night. They abandoned anything in the throw game in the second half because everybody knew Auburn was not going to do anything to give Georgia a shot with a turnover in the throw game. And Auburn continued to run the ball. Kerryon Johnson continued to run the ball. There was a point in the first half where I saw, and you remember that part where Georgia has like 4 guys around the punt return guy for Auburn's returner for fair catch interference, sloppy, undisciplined football. The other thing that comes to my mind is there was a point in the first half where even Roquan Smith missed a tackle.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens. This is why this is the biggest big boy league in the country.
This is a guy that's missed 4 or 5 tackles all season long, happened to miss one tonight. But I don't think that you're being an unsupportive fan if you call what happened in that stadium what it was, a bad night for Georgia on both sides of the ball and on special teams as well. I mean, I don't think that you are I don't think that you're abandoning your team if you say that. Now, it's one thing to say, well, this is just typical Georgia and this is, same old, same old. That's a different category of discussion. But you can believe that Georgia's still alive for the SEC championship. You can believe that Georgia still can make the college football playoff. You can believe all of that and then still say, but what in the world happened in this stadium tonight? It's okay to be mad about that and still believe that Georgia's got a lot out in front of it. I mean, let's not sugarcoat what this was. I mean, this was a night that a lot of Georgia players go back to Athens embarrassed because they're better competitors than what they showed tonight.
They're better than what they showed, but I guess the point I'm just kind of kicking my toes about here is that Auburn played great football tonight. Auburn played its great football. Let's just leave it at that. Auburn's greatness was better than Georgia's average football today. That's where I just don't know about the bad.
But listen, but the problem with that, though, Jeff, is that this is not the Auburn postgame show. I mean, the Auburn postgame show is job to talk about how good Auburn was. We said this in the earlier portion of our broadcast. Some of you missed it because of some technical issues. But when you got, Holland and Davis and those guys coming off the edge, you do shake their hand. And Braden Smith, this offensive line, you shake his hand. I thought Stidham did a good job tonight. You shake their hand. But, we still have some issues to deal with on the Georgia side here as well.
Oh, yeah,
do I expect them to play this bad again this season? No, I don't. But, I mean, you still got to ask, well, what exactly did happen? Why exactly did Georgia play so bad in the game it just played?
I just think Georgia's running game was diffused. Auburn played a great game. Auburn's got a bunch of guys on the offensive line that have been there, it seems like, since 2003.
Yeah.
And those guys pushed Georgia around, and they got after Jake Fromm, and they made a bunch of plays. Now, we're not going to sit here and go X's and O's. We're not going to say everything about this, but there were things Georgia did that just stinking killed them when they were trying to keep up with Auburn tonight. That's the part that I think bothers me.
Reed Bowers in the comments section talks about Jacob Eason. And obviously, if you look at the stats for Fromm tonight, this was one of the first times, really going back to the Notre Dame game, that Fromm doesn't have what I think of as a really top-caliber statistical performance. This obviously was not Fromm's best night. He was under pressure a lot on third down. But what the commenter brings up is the idea of playing Jacob Eason. Listen, I'm a big believer that even though tonight was not Fromm's best night, Fromm is Georgia's quarterback. This is the guy that you ride with. This is the guy that you are that you're playing with. This is your quarterback. This is your quarterback this season, and it was his game tonight. It's his game next week against Kentucky. Whatever happens against Georgia Tech and the SEC championship, that's his game there as well. I know there's this thought of when you see a team that's losing, you want to do something about it. You want to make some sort of change. But for me, there was no change to be made tonight. Georgia just brought its game plan into Auburn and got beaten up, got kicked around. But Fromm is still this team's quarterback.
Yeah, I'd just be careful with that and think about that, the knee-jerk reaction about pulling that. Because if you want to make that case about putting Jake Fromm on the bench and Jacob Eason in there, you might as well say, well, you should put Elijah Holyfield and DeAndre Swift in the backfield as well. You might want to just say, where's Ben Cleveland on the offensive line? I mean, Georgia tried that unbalanced line again. They tried getting a lot of folks on the offensive line. They tried a lot of things tonight against Auburn, but Auburn clearly beat Georgia up front. And listen, when Georgia runs the ball 21 times for 19 yards in the first half, and they have 5 penalties for 55 yards, drive extending penalties at that, They're not going to beat an Auburn football team like that.
Jerry Lewis says he sounds like you and I are getting tense with each other. Never, Jeff. Listen. Jeff and I are on the same team here. I'm just going to stick up for the fans a little bit who have a right to be upset about the game tonight. Traw Duke says you still got to ask what happened. That's right. Woody Brown says, what was Chaney calling tonight? Pathetic. Not the 9-0 team we watched. And, this is where it does kind of go back to what, you mentioned this a moment ago. I talked about this a lot in the earlier portion of our show. Georgia is very, very clear about what it's going to do offensively. It's going to stick to its running game. And listen, 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to be so glad that's what this Georgia team is all about, because look at who's winning national championships. It is, an Ohio State, an Alabama, Clemson last year, teams that do succeed along the line of scrimmage. And Georgia's not going to sacrifice its principles. It's not going to compromise on that issue. And, tonight it wasn't about being stubborn. I heard some people in the press box even say this, that's stubborn Georgia, stubborn Kirby Smart, stubborn Jim Chaney. It's not about being stubborn. It's the recipe.
What you do.
It's the recipe for what has worked all season long. And this is where it does come into, hey, you got to congratulate your opponent. On this issue, I will join you and agree with you that this is where you're going to say, hey, nice job, Auburn, because Georgia is going to keep trying to run it, even if it doesn't work in the first half. And tonight, Auburn was just, and I hate to say it, they were just better along both lines of scrimmage. They were just better right there.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know where you guys are seeing some friction there, but to me, 2 points. One, saying another team is better does not make, when everybody starts doing the knee jerks about changing quarterbacks, Jim Chaney's a bad play caller. I mean, goodness gracious. If anybody wanted to grade Jim Chaney on those first 9 games, is there any way he's not getting an A?
Absolutely. Randy Preston on the comment section says stay calm. It was supposed to be a close game, and it got away. 2 turnovers on punts and missed field goal changed the game. Auburn played great. Agree with you on all that, Randy, but here's the issue, and you know this, and the commenters in our comment section of the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show prove this each and every week. There is a big picture that will become more clear the more time passes. For some folks, they got to drive back to the Eastern Time Zone. They got to get out of Alabama and get to Georgia. For the rest of you, got to turn that TV off and wake up, go to church tomorrow, whatever it is you're going to do. And around that lunch table tomorrow, that breakfast table on Monday, the clarity of the goals still being out in front of Georgia are all there for you. For right now, though, I don't think that anybody should be able to fault a Georgia fan for saying, but I still wanted to beat Auburn, too. I can play for an SEC championship. I can make the college football playoff. But I've beaten Auburn every year going back to 2013, the last time Auburn won. Yeah. I wanted to keep that winning streak alive. I don't fault the Georgia fan who feels that way tonight.
So many things swirl in my head right there, Brandon. So, number one, everybody's wanting to search for 1980 again. 12-0s don't happen anymore, but that's because they play about 14 or 15 games. Yeah. Things to think about right there. Now, I'm in a Dog Nation shirt. This guy here is in a Dog Nation shirt. Here's where we try to be something different than the just blowhards talking, saying the right talking points, oozing, helping hurt feelings. College football is different. I'm going to share a story what me and Brandon were saying off air when we were letting our technical difficulties get coached up back again and get us back on the field. Brandon and I were talking about the Ohio State score. Yeah. And Ohio State today just destroyed Michigan State. Yeah. And that's the way college football is. My colleague Brandon makes the point that Ohio State is one of the best 4 teams in college football.
Think they are.
Still thinks they are. And you remember where Ohio State has been twice this year. I agree with you, Brandon. They have, when they're rolling, you look at the roster, you look at what they can be on the football field, they are one of the 4 best football squads in the country when they're clicking. No doubt about that. The last thing I'll say there, they've lost twice. And for some reason, they lose football games. Kind of similar to those same reasons why the Georgia Bulldogs might have lost this football game tonight.
That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. It's the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. We're live here in Auburn, Alabama. You see Jordan-Hare Stadium behind us. It was not a good night for the Dogs in that stadium. But you know what? Georgia's going to be back here again. And the next time, we may be very well toasting that Dixie vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. It's made in the South by people from the South for people like you and me right here in the South. And we've been drinking it after wins each and every Saturday this season. We'll get back to that here very soon. Let me hit a few more comments. Nick Simmons says this was not the same Auburn team that played Clemson. They are a good team on any given Saturday, and anyone can go down. It just wasn't our night. So Nick's point about Auburn versus Clemson probably is true. And, I follow this enough to kind of know what's been going on, but not enough to know all the twists and turns. I mean, Auburn has done a lot of different personnel groupings with its offensive line this season.
Yeah.
Obviously, you go back to the Clemson game, Auburn gave up 11 sacks to a Clemson that night. Now, Clemson's got a really good defensive line, but 11 was this big, huge total that got a lot of people's attention. That's almost a season total for Auburn in previous years. Gave that up to a Clemson then. But it is an example of, and listen, much like Georgia's got Sam Pittman, Auburn has Herb Hand, a really good offensive line coach. And Hand has done some work with this Auburn offensive line to kind of get it playing the way that it was expected to before the season by now. Didn't start the year off that way, but clearly Jared Stidham is a more comfortable, confident quarterback. Kerryon Johnson setting records from a scoring and touchdown standpoint. That Auburn offensive line, you got to give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, Auburn's offensive line, I think all their phases of their football team complemented themselves today. Jared Stidham, to me, does not look like a world beater by himself. Neither do those receivers. But when you add that run game with Kerryon Johnson and you add the way they ran the football, add Will on the Georgia front, no matter who they brought in there. Trent Thompson, he was working before the game. Lots of NFL scouts were looking at him. Georgia's got a lot of personnel up front. They're supposed to be pretty stinking good, but Auburn was just better. I think Auburn had a lot of veteran players, guys that have been in the program a lot of years, redshirt players that have been in the Auburn program for quite some time. I think of a young man like Austin Golson. I remember him when he was a recruit at Prattville.
Yep.
Seems like he's been at Auburn forever. And everyone was talking earlier about, changing positions and everything else like that. That kind of just dovetails to what I said earlier. Don't be that fan that just carnivores and cannibalizes your roster and all those guys that gave you all those happy memories all those other Saturdays of the year. Don't be that fan. I mean, Jacob Eason, I saw him today. I saw him working out. One of the coolest things I think I've seen from Jacob Eason this year is Jacob was plugged into this game today. Jacob, after Andrew Thomas gives up a big sack, stalls out a Georgia drive earlier, man just beats him, comes around the corner, takes down Jake Fromm, blindside, big hit. I saw Jacob Eason go find Andrew Thomas before the next play, grab him by the helmet, whisper something into his ear, saying the right thing, being a good teammate, and that's your backup quarterback. And Jacob Eason, when things are not going right for Jacob Eason in his timeline and his process of everything, he thought he would be at the University of Georgia. He is still a member of that team, and he's doing the right thing there. He's going to Andrew Thomas and trying to prop him up, which is way maybe I would like to see more of the Georgia fans do this instead of tearing down the football team today.
Andrew Fleming says we were number one playing at Auburn in the Deep South oldest rival. Did anybody realize this game was going to be the comments are coming fast here, but obviously there was a lot on the line for Georgia today, and obviously it's a huge disappointment for Georgia fans that Georgia doesn't kind of live up to its end of the billing in the rivalry. Jason Green says Fromm is loved because he's from Georgia. He doesn't have Eason's arm and talent. You can't argue that he does. Here's what I'll say about that, Jason. Yes, Fromm does have an inferior throwing arm to Jacob Eason, but there's a lot more ways to measure talent than just overall arm strength. I mean, I'm not going to get into the kind of discussion where I disparage either one of these guys, but all I'll say is looking back on the first 9 games of Jake Fromm, and I'm even going to include tonight the good and the bad, I have been very happy with Georgia's quarterback play thus far this season, and I believe that Georgia, who I still think has a terrific chance of winning the SEC championship, I still believe that Jake Fromm is the kind of quarterback that's capable of getting that done, whether he be a freshman or not. So, yeah, tonight's a bad night. You lick your wounds. I'm obviously in a bad mood because of it, but I'm not making any changes. I'm not making any changes to the philosophy this team has used all season long. I'm not making a change at quarterback. I'm not really making any kind of changes whatsoever. The same team that I brought, or that Georgia brought with it to Auburn, is the same one I want to see show up against Kentucky next week, and Georgia Tech, and then the SEC championship game. Obviously, just hoping for better results. But Jeff, it's one of those things where sometimes as a fan, you can be so disappointed about what happens that you want to see something done because action always feels better than inaction. But in this case, though, there's really no action to take. You just got beat. And Georgia and Auburn will play again. And you know what? There's a very good chance that Georgia does to Auburn what Auburn did to it tonight. But there's no real change. There's no real knee-jerk reaction that comes to this.
What are people thinking? I mean, you guys watched the broadcast. Me and Brandon were covering the team. I saw a lot of things with Danielson today about the broadcast and how it seems like he was pointing out a couple of times. I don't know whether he was trying to, rev up the Georgia fans' chances so they didn't tune out. But I saw a lot of times where, like, they talked about sure touchdowns Georgia had taken away. I saw one particular one with the flea flicker where it was probably on Georgia's side of the hash. They were going in towards the Auburn end zone. And, yes, Mecole Hardman was streaking wide open, but it looked like that Jake Fromm was going to have to wear a suit made of about 3 Auburn defenders to even get the ball off. I don't see that as points that Georgia left on the board there.
In the comment section, Jose Longway says, Brandon, admit it was a horribly coached game by Georgia. It was a horrible game by Georgia, but I mean, where does the horrible coaching come in? I mean, what coaching decision could have been done to prevent this today? It's a disappointing game. I mean, listen, I'm gonna be right there with you, gnashing teeth. I'm just as mad about it as anybody. In a minute, I got to walk down this student union in Auburn, walk across this campus, get back to my car, and listen to these people, crow all the way to the stadium. Trust me. I mean, I'm as upset tonight as anybody is. But what specific thing are you going to blame on coaches tonight? You're going to point the finger at Jim Chaney? Running game didn't work. You weren't running the football. I mean, we've been showing you the stats all night long. I mean, I'll give them, to you again as far as it goes for Georgia tonight. 46 yards on the ground, just 27 for Chubb on 11 carries. Just 21 for Michelle on 9 carries. I mean, these are guys that are getting a little bit more than 2 yards a carry here. DeAndre Swift doesn't get a carry in the first half. I thought he'd come back strong in the second half. Has just 4 carries for 18 yards. Those have been your bell cows all season long. They couldn't get it done tonight. I mean, be upset about it, but what do you blame the coaches for on that?
Yeah, I'm going to scratch my head about that one because I don't know how Georgia – what are they supposed to do, adapt? Georgia is not going to win many games when they can't run the football like that, when the strength of their football team is riding those horses and everything else like that. I mean, that's how they chop that wood, Brandon. That's the axe. They can't change out the axe. So, I mean, what do we want to see a coaching move where Georgia goes 5 wides and they spread everybody out and they try to just go up and down the field and attack Auburn that way? Georgia doesn't really have 5 great receivers like that. And then it exposes those tackles and that pass rush to what Georgia doesn't do well on the offensive line.
I totally agree. That's a formation not available to Georgia right now.
Yeah.
Chris Johnston does bring up a good point, though. And if you want to talk about this is a fair point. Georgia, I thought, did a great job of using its timeouts at the end of the half, got the benefit of a Mecole Hardman punt return, got the ball, deep in Auburn territory, 22-yard line, something like that. That's a case where Georgia does run it on first down and then settles for a Rodrigo Blankenship field goal attempt, which he missed. You want to say that's a strategic miss? That might have been.
That is.
I'm okay with that. I mean, if you want to call that a strategic miss for Georgia, I'm kind of okay with that. A ball to the end zone right there, because I said this to you before the show started. You run the ball with Sony Michel. Georgia had to get up and clock it quickly because it had no more timeouts. If Michel's carry attempt before the Rodrigo miss, if it had gone for more yardage, like if it had gone for 7 or 8 yards, the clock keeps moving. Georgia's got to run up to the line to get the ball. They may not even get a field goal attempt off at that point in time. So Chris Johnston, and if you want to say that's a coaching miss, like some other people have mentioned in the comment section, I'm okay with calling that a coaching miss. Georgia was given an opportunity there at the end of the first half, did not do enough with it. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with blaming that on coaches.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's a situation there where Georgia. I would like to see Georgia take a shot with down the end zone, especially with those back shoulders. I mean, Auburn's defensive backs are not that good. You look at a guy like Trey Matthews. Sure, he can hit, but he's not going to be able to hang with DeAndre Swift or anybody in coverage. He's not a coverage safety, a ball hawking type safety. The thing that I'm going to look at there, and I mean, Kirby already mentioned in his post game press conference. He came across my phone. He said that was a mistake there. What we did there with running Sony Michel there, and what we tried to do there in that end of the half scenario, he said that was just a plain mistake.
David Lott in the comment section says, here's something that was coaching. Do not leap on kicks. That's a reference to the first half 15-yard penalty. I believe it was on DeAndre Walker on the Auburn punt. That's a leap. And listen, I know this is going to sound like sour grapes. I know this is going to sound like spilled milk, whatever comment you want to make. I think that's the dumbest rule in the world. And I know what some of y'all said to me on Twitter. Well, it's still a rule, even if it's dumb. It's a rule that Georgia's got to follow, and you're right about that. So if Kirby Smart should have done more to instill in his players not to leap on that punt, that's fine. I think there's a moment in the heat of an intense SEC game where instincts take over, and if a punt's coming, your instinct to block it is going to take over. Listen, this is not me grappling about the refs. That's not what I'm going to do here. It's not. But I think that's more of a dumb rule than a dumb play by DeAndre Walker. But I can absolutely understand why you may disagree. I absolutely can understand, and I'm sure you're probably even saying this in the comment section right now, that it's still a rule that's got to be followed. And yes, certainly legally speaking, you're exactly right about that. But, I have to admit, when I first saw it, my reaction was, is this really what we're going to try to do to protect safety in the players, pretend this is not a full contact sport, not let guys leap anymore? I mean, that's like fourth grade recess. I mean, that's not allowed in college football anymore, leaping. So I understand where people are coming from on that. For me, that's more of the dumbness of the rule than it is the dumbness of Georgia for getting the penalty. But I'm sure many of you completely disagree with that.
Well, I mean, I think what's happening there is you've got to look at, I think that's already happened in the Alabama game. I got a text from a buddy that just said that same scenario actually happened in the Alabama game as well. An Alabama player basically got the same foul on them. I hope I get that right. Somebody please correct me in the timeline if that's not accurate. I mean, 24-hour rule I think is something to think about here with Auburn as well. The things that I'm going to look for next week is you want to make sure Kirby Smart says that the boys bounce back from this. Yeah. They relish those physical practices. They make the corrections. They come in eager to learn and eager to fix. And I want to see Georgia come out in that Kentucky game and play a lot cleaner. I mean, they're going to have edges on personnel. They're going to have edges. They're going to be able to move the ball on Kentucky with the bread and butter, which is the run game, and that'll be fine. I want that clean game to happen again. I don't want those miscues in the special teams to rear their ugly head again.
Carl Mann brings up an interesting point. If Riley Ridley doesn't drop the pass, if McCole Harmon doesn't muff the punt, this is technically potentially a different kind of game right there. Those are two big plays that really change the game. A drop's going to happen. A muff punt's going to happen. You can't go a whole season without one. I mean, but it is worth pointing out that those miscues, those are the kinds of things, those two in particular, you can keep all the penalties, you can keep everything else in the game. But if you could just give fans the Ridley drop back and the McCole missed punt back, that does change this game a lot. And the McCole one especially, because that's the thing that allowed Georgia not to establish any momentum to start the third quarter, because they'd gotten the 3-and-out on the first drive to start the third quarter. I mean, there is no other way to say it. That was an absolute punch in the stomach.
Well, yeah, they are, but then Georgia's clawing to get back into that. But that kind of just underscores how I generally feel about this game, Brandon, is give Georgia those plays, and maybe that turns a 40-17 into a 40-30 game or something like that. My point is there was a point in this game where it was 30-7, and Georgia is straining to make a play because they're that far behind Auburn. Maybe they make those plays, but they didn't show the mental discipline. They didn't show everything on offense. They didn't block Auburn enough. They didn't move them around on the offensive line. They didn't build enough stuff around them that if you give them those plays back, Brandon, I don't know if they build on them, man. I don't know if they build on them. I just think this was not a Georgia team tonight, which is probably indicative of college football right now. They weren't firing on even three of the four cylinders.
I think
tonight.
The point that the commenter's making is on a night when Georgia made a lot of mistakes, it's those two mistakes that probably stuck out even further than anything else, although you also have the 115-yard penalty that led to a Jared Stidham touchdown early in the game on the big throw. So, there's actually probably more than that as well.
I just love the plays because everybody's going to microscope those plays. But you could sit there and say, what if Georgia knocks down the ball that they threw deep to Jared Stidham, and what if Dominic Sanders had dropped back in the coverage and played the middle of the field? You mean that was a ball? You remember that long touchdown pass in the first half that I think Auburn hits that puts them up 23-7 when Jared Stidham hits the big ball?
Yeah.
Early in the third quarter, excuse me. But that's a play where that ball is up in the air, and it was a good catch, but you've got a situation. It looked like a lot of things that Javon Wims has done this year as well, going up and getting that ball on a defender. And just a lot of stuff there. You give Georgia those plays. I just want you to honestly answer the question. Give Georgia those plays. Do you think Georgia makes it a 40-38 game? I don't think so.
It'd been nice. It'd been nice to have in one way or another. So for me, and we'll get ready to wrap up here in a moment. Let me remind you that's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. This is our Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. We are live here in the shadows of Jordan-Hare Stadium. Obviously, we wish we had better news to bring you tonight, but it is what it is. 40-17. Georgia loses to Auburn tonight. Drops to 9-1. We'll find out how far it drops in the college football playoff top 25, which will come out on Tuesday. But Georgia's obviously already punched his ticket to the SEC championship game. So all the goals still out in front of Georgia for this season. A few thoughts from me as we get ready to kind of wrap things up here for a moment. We'll take a couple more comments before we get out of here as well. I thought the Auburn crowd tonight was amazing. I mean, I thought it was really, really loud and really, really intense. And what I hope is, and listen, I've said this 1,000 times already, and I'm going to say it again. I'm not trying to feed y'all a bunch of rainbows here. I'm not. You can listen to the official broadcast. They'll tell you everything's great and everything's fine. This is the real conversation. We're going to tell you what's really going on. But that said, by next Saturday, my hope is that Georgia fans are ready to fill Sanford Stadium once again. Be mad tonight. Be in a bad mood tonight. But final chance in Sanford Stadium next Saturday. Kentucky for Senior Day. And this crop of seniors deserves your applause.
Yeah.
This group of seniors that's going to be saying goodbye to Sanford Stadium next Saturday deserves your applause. So what I'm hoping is, even coming on the heels of a loss, that Georgia fans can shake it off by next Saturday and ready to fill Sanford Stadium, make a bunch of noise, and really send guys like Chubb and Michelle and Davin Bellamy and Roquan Smith. Probably Roquan's last game, although it's on a senior night.
Yeah, definitely his last game.
Lorenzo Carter, send these guys off the way they deserve to be. I hope that's what happens next Saturday, and I hope that this awful night in Auburn can be put behind us by the time you get ready for next Saturday night.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue for what I've got on my mind right now, Brandon, is those seniors. And remember, those seniors, Bellamy, Carter, Michelle, and Chubb that came back, I think accelerated the progress curve for Georgia. I'm just a big perspective guy in this life. I'm a naturally positive person, but I'm just a perspective guy in this life. And I remember you and I doing a lot of shows last year, Brandon, about Nicholls State. And I remember even the highs and lows about they had to just gnash the teeth to beat Missouri. They had to gnash their teeth to beat Kentucky. Remember their performances against Louisiana Lafayette, Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech. This Georgia program is light years away from where that is right now, and a lot of that early progress is going to have to do because of those seniors. Come out and thank those guys from the bottom of your hearts, because they've made Georgia football really, really fun again. And let's not let this 40-17 thing douse all that this season.
Final thought from me here. Tonight is another example of why there's a Centel Intel every day and why you're on Dog Nation Daily twice a week. Tonight's the example of that, because what you see in a game like this is you got to be fully stocked at every position group, and you got to have a great player at every position. I mean, if you want to go win the Big Ten West, you can be pretty good at most spots. If you want to win the SEC, you got to have 4 and 5 stars on top of 4 and 5 stars,
and beating the SEC too. Don't forget that, going unbeaten in the SEC.
Yeah, exactly.
Too.
So tonight is an example of why we pay so much attention to recruiting here at DogNation.com. And people don't want to hear this right now, but there are going to be some holes plugged starting December 20th, and then in February, and then the class 2019. And this process for Kirby Smart's a long way away from being done.
I tell you one thing, I'm gonna bookmark this. I'm gonna think about it. I sure hope I'm here in 2019 with this gentleman right here next to me doing post-game shows about Georgia football. And let me tell you this, guys, I kind of see some of the cards. I kind of see the tarot cards about what's happening with the Georgia football program. Doesn't always show up in the intel yet all the time. But I'm going to tell you this, the Georgia football team that will come back to Jordan-Hare Stadium in 2019, the next time Georgia plays, will have optimum personnel at just about every position group.
That's Jeff Centel. I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks for being with us here tonight for the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show special. Thanks for Dixie Vodka, who's always with us home and on the road. It is the South's best tasting vodka. Be a lot of debates in the South this time of year when it comes to the college football rankings and everything else. No debate about the South's best tasting vodka. It is our friends at Dixie Vodka. Be in a bad mood tonight, but be back Monday 10 a.m. for another episode of Dog Nation Daily Live. Jeff will have a Centel Intel. We'll try to figure out more about what happened here and get ready for Kentucky next week, and then a charge back to the SEC Championship. Let's play these guys again, and let's give them a nice little rematch here. That'd be fun. Or let's take down Alabama. If you're a Georgia fan, either way, you'd take either result, and I think there's a really good chance Georgia's able to do that. We'll talk more about that in the future. For tonight, though, it's all about licking wounds. Georgia loses 40-17. We'll see you again here next time on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show.